Shalom. Welcome to Light to the Nations. For some time now, we've been studying the laws pertaining to the altar, the second chapter of the Rambam, Maimonides Beit HaBechira, and we've seen that there are many details pertaining to the exact structure and measurement of the altar, and we're not finished yet. We have much to learn about exactly how the altar is to be constructed, details that have been handed down in every generation that are derived from the vision of the great prophet Ezekiel. And one thing that strikes us is the role that the temple plays in the life not only of Israel, but in the life of the human being. Because coming to the temple is to be a life-changing experience. The temple is the meeting place between earth and the divine. Everything that goes on there is to be an experience that makes a deep impression upon a person. That is really the goal of the pilgrimage to the temple and of the service in the temple. And such, it was designed by God, really, to empower a person to be able to transcend his own personal, everyday life and understand the significance of the life that God gave him. And everything about being by the altar in the temple is about internalizing the significance of every moment of the life that God gave us, which unfortunately sometimes we really either take for granted or forget or become insensitive to. So these details pertaining to the altar have been given to us for the express purpose of preparing to rebuild. Because indeed, what's missing from the world today and what is missing from the spiritual experience that Israel needs in order to be instrumental in bringing about the redemption is this life-changing experience of realizing that we are in the most intimate brush with the divine that we possibly can have. I want to share some thoughts with you in the midst of our study about the altar and examine some verses that I think shed a great deal of light upon this whole idea of just how life-changing the experience of being in the temple is supposed to be. And of course, when we begin to study about the temple in the Torah, we begin with the model of the tabernacle, which served as the temple, as we have learned. In the earlier days, the days of the desert wanderings, we have a very interesting verse in Parshat Truma, chapter 25 of the book of Exodus, where God tells us in verse 8, after telling us, "And let them make for me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them," the next verse tells us, "According to all that I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its vessels, even so you shall make it." So there is a concept of God having shown to Moses an image of the tabernacle on some level of prophetic revelation. It was according to this divine plan that Moshe was to oversee the construction of the tabernacle. But interestingly, we find a similar verse repeated not only regarding the tabernacle itself, that is to say the temple, but also regarding two other features of the Mikdash, the Mishkan, /Mikdash. These words are repeated regarding two other items as well. According to that which you have seen in the mountain. Regarding what do we find these words repeated? According to that image, according to that which you have seen in the mountain. We only find that, in addition to this time where it appears regarding the tabernacle as a whole, we find that regarding the menorah and regarding the altar. We find this unusual verse. God says to Moses, according to that which you saw in the mountain. And you know, there is a famous idea expressed by our sages that Moses had a difficult time comprehending exactly what the spiritual concept of the menorah is, and in fact physically how to execute it, and God showed him an image of the menorah. And so too regarding the altar, and you notice that the verse in the Torah actually says, when we are first introduced to the mitzvah, to the commandment, to the concept of building the altar, the word is hamizbeach, and you shall build the altar, and that is called in Hebrew the Hey HaYediyah. It is the definitive Hey, the definitive the. In other words, you shall build the altar, that one, not a different one. Which one? The one that you saw, the one that I showed you, according to the image that I showed you. And indeed, one of our great sages has pointed out in a very beautiful idea that this phrase, according to that which you saw in the mountain, so shall you do, only appears 3 times. As I shared with you, in Teruma, it appears in the beginning of the collective commandment regarding the tabernacle, and it also appears in regards the menorah and in regards the altar, hamizbeach. And this great rabbi describes this phenomena of the understanding of these verses in a very unique way that I really feel compelled to share with you. And you know that every verse in the Torah is perfect, and every concept is exactly calculated according to the greatest divine wisdom for its meaning. And the idea which this great sage puts forth is basically along the lines of everything that we've been sharing together until now. He points out that the phrase, according to that which I will show you in the mountain, is specifically stated regarding the Mishkan itself, the tabernacle, the menorah, and the altar, precisely because of the fact that these 3 things are life-changing, and that experientially these 3 things constitute, bring about, and represent drastic change in the world. And he explains exactly why that is. He explains, first and foremost, that the establishment of the tabernacle brought about a very huge change in the world because of the fact that it actually brought the divine presence into the world and really proved for the first time to the whole world, to the whole human race, that a nation can live with God in its midst, which is the whole point of the tabernacle. So that brought about a drastic paradigm shift of consciousness for man, heralded by Israel. So that's the first change. The second great change is the concept of the menorah, because of the fact that the concept of the menorah is a concept that tells man to bring light into the world. The concept of the menorah burning at night, and this is something that we have had occasion here on Light to the Nations to discuss, it's a very great chidush. That means it's a very novel idea in the world, because it's not only a concept of the fact that man can facilitate the bringing of divine light into the world. The commandment of lighting the menorah, which burns at night in the temple, that commandment actually means not only that man can, which is in itself totally revolutionary, because there are so many people who think that man can't do a thing in this world and can't affect any great change on any spiritual level, that's for sure. But the menorah teaches us that not only can man, but that he must. He is obligated to bring about a change spiritually in this world, to make it into a place of divine dwelling, a place for the divine presence, by bringing the light of the divine presence into the world through the menorah, that he can and must. And furthermore, as we have taught in this very venue, that that very light is something which people will have a hard time seeing and will even deny. Because the greatest light of God is beyond our comprehension. And the third concept, which the Torah itself, again, associates according to everything that you have seen, that I have shown you, that you have seen the image in the mountain, the third instance in which these words are associated is in fact the altar, which we have been discussing of late. And that, he maintains, is also because of a great chidush, a very novel idea, something new to the world, something very drastic, a change, and a very great life-changing experience. And that is to say that the animal world as well is a place in which can be found the light of God. In other words, the lowest level of creation, where we would not think to look for the light of God, that it is there as well, and that this is the very purpose of the creation of that level of creation, to show that also in the lowest place, that it goes according to the will of God, and that man can, again, and must elevate even that level of creation to reveal in it its essence, the divine spark of creation. And that, of course, is what goes on at the altar when the animal goes up on the altar, and that is a very earth-shattering change in the natural order and the natural perception of how people would assume that that is a strata from which we can derive no connection to godliness. But one thing that we haven't answered yet, what is the significance of these words according to everything that you saw in the mountain, meaning, of course, Sinai, the time of the Sinai revelation, the giving of the Torah? What about the Sinai revelation is connected to these three things? The tabernacle, meaning the temple, the menorah, and the altar. In other words, now we have analyzed why these three things can be said to bring about such a huge change, and how they are, in essence, really introducing bold new concepts to humanity, and how they are and should be, hopefully, for the recipients, meaning us in the temple, life-changing. But what is the connection, according to all that you saw in the mountain? And we know that Sinai in itself was an amazing revelatory experience. But why these three things did Moshe need to be presented with some sort of image at that very event in order to be able to bring about their fruition, to execute them as projects? And actually, when we think about it, we can realize it's not that hard to understand. At the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, which the whole world witnessed, we witnessed an aspect of godliness that is so inimitable and so far from human comprehension. Our sages tell us that God uttered all of the 10 Commandments simultaneously, something, of course, which is beyond human comprehension, beyond human ability, and yet the people of Israel were able to comprehend, were able to understand. One of the things that the Sinai revelation teaches us, when God literally held nature in abeyance superseded the natural order of things. It teaches us that in the way in which God runs the world, no two moments are alike. Everything is constantly different. You never really know what to expect. And that the great way in which God conducts the universe is full of change, full of aspiration, yearning, pining towards spiritual fulfillment and completion, and moving closer and closer to Him. That's what the Sinai revelation really represented, brought home, and taught us. The fact that the existence of God is one thing, but not only does He exist, His relationship with creation and the way in which He drives the universe is so vibrant and so full of change. And everything that we perceived at Sinai can be really the stuff of our everyday experience. So really the temple is designed to be a template, if you would, a flashback, an imitation of the Sinai experience. Indeed, the tabernacle was erected first and foremost at the foot of Mount Sinai. The experience of coming into the presence of God in the temple is designed to be a continuation of everything that was revealed at Mount Sinai, when literally the heavens opened up and we were able to perceive a direct connection with eternity. That's what really goes on in the temple. And the repetition of these words specifically regarding these three things, the tabernacle as a whole, the light of the divine presence, which is represented by the light of the menorah, and the experience that one goes through being connected to the altar, bringing an offering to the altar, these three things are a direct continuation of the experience at Sinai. And we must never forget, in all of our studies relating to the temple, in all of our work regarding the goal of rebuilding the temple, and all of our support for that project, and all of our education regarding the rebuilding of the temple, we must never forget that the goal is a total spiritual revolution from that which is taken today as commonplace and as being the goal of life, to be religious and to understand, okay, we're connected to God, fine. That's not the level that we were designed to be functioning on, that we were created for. The level that we were designed by God to be living on is a level of total revelation. It is the very opposite of any feeling of complacency at any moment of the day. No two moments are the same. That's what we learned at Sinai. And every aspect of the experience in the temple is designed to flow over into every aspect of our everyday lives, which is basically, in a word, drastic, new, life-changing experience. And all of this we derive from those simple words, according to that which I shall show you, which you saw in the mountain, relating to the direct connection between the experience of the temple and the experience at Sinai. That's one thought that I really wanted to interject at this particular point. Now, in our study of the altar, the dimensions of the altar, the various amot, composed of various tefachim, 5 and 6, we learned about the foundation of the altar, and we learned about the horns of the altar, those 4 square protrusions coming out of the top of the altar, 1 amah by 1 amah. They are called keren, karnei hamizbeach. They are called the horns of the altar. this also is a subject which I would like to spend a little bit more time on a deeper level, trying to understand the significance of this feature of the altar. There is a midrash which tells us regarding the commandment in the Torah of Asita karnatav al arba pinotav, and you shall construct its corners on its horns on its four corners. There is a midrash which tells us very enigmatically that one of the purposes of the horns of the altar is to atone, to help to atone for a nation that is exalted through four horns, referring to the nation of Israel. There is a concept that we can find now in the Bible that Israel is exalted, is praised according to the verses in the Torah. Israel is praised in the context of four horns. What are those four horns? Firstly, there is the horn of Israel. How do I know that Israel has a horn? Because there is a verse in the book of Psalms. The verse reads, He also has exalted the horn of his people, a praise for all his pious ones, even for the children of Israel, a people near to him. Hallelujah. He has exalted the horn of his people. So, according to this midrash, very cryptic in the Midrash Tanchuma, this verse refers to what is known as the horn of Israel. Then there is something called the horn of the Torah. What is the horn of the Torah? We find another verse. And that verse is in the book of Habakkuk, Prophet Habakkuk, in the 3rd chapter, verse 4. The verse reads, There is a brightness as the light, rays, which is the same word in Hebrew, issue from his hands, and there the hiding of his power is lodged. According to our sages, the mystery of this verse refers to the horn of the Torah, second of the four horns. Then there is something called the horn of the Kahuna, the horn of the priesthood. And this horn is referred to again in the book of Psalms. It's in Psalm number 92, verse 12. That is, in fact, the psalm, a song for the Sabbath day, which is attributed to none other than Adam Harishon, the first man. The verse reads, But my horn shall you exalt like the horn of a wild ox. Now somehow our sages tell us that this horn refers to the horn of the priesthood. And the fourth horn is in fact the horn of Malchut, the horn of kingdom, represented by Moshe, about which the verse in Exodus tells us that his face shone. And in Hebrew, Moshe lo yada ki karan or panav, that his face literally shone, and it's the same word. So this is a play on words that our sages utilize to tell us that there's another horn, the horn of the priesthood. So somehow there is a allegorical or esoterical concept that there are four horns, and that these horns, represented by these verses, are significant of a singular quality possessed by Israel, and that the four horns on the corners of the altar are significant somehow, we have to see, in bringing about an atonement for the nation of Israel, which is praised, as we have seen in these verses, through these 4 horns. But what remains to be seen and what we need to explore is, what is the significance specifically of these horns on the altar? In other words, whatever these horns represent and however we are to understand them, why is there a connection between these horns of Israel and the altar more than any of the other vessels in the temple? And we already know from our experience through our studies of the Holy Temple that every detail of the vessels is replete with great meaning, and we know that every verse in the Torah possesses great meaning and mystery and significance. So as we continue to explore, we shall surely uncover yet another level of meaning in the altar, which sits before the divine presence in the Holy Temple, signifying the light of the divine presence, the light to Israel, and the light to the nations.